Yeah, good morning, Annette.
Good morning.
We are now live.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you again, and welcome to our virtual board meeting. Good morning to the members of the public who are watching. We continue to hold virtual meetings, and so there are a few housekeeping items we should all keep in mind. We're streaming the public portion of the meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and we will post it on YouTube after the meeting. To those who are in attendance, your microphone has been muted, and I ask that you put your hand up if you would like to speak, and we'll retain a list of speaking requests as we go. Once you're called upon to speak, please unmute yourself and proceed. And once you are finished speaking, I kindly request that you mute yourself once again. As it relates to voting, please raise a hand to indicate your vote when a vote is called. Should you be disconnected from the video call, please rejoin the link previously provided. As we've begun to do recently, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather, in which the Region of Peel operates as part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississauga of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa people, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississauga of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. We will begin today with section 12 with Caledon OPP. Before we begin on that agenda item, I'd like to invite my colleague, board member, Mr. Bowden, to provide an announcement and some remarks.
Thank you, Chair Attia. It's as with anything in life, there's some things that are duties and some things that are great pleasure. It's a great pleasure, and today is the latter. On September the 20th, just recently, the OPP confirmed that Inspector Grant will now be the new permanent detachment commander in Caledon. I have been so fortunate over the last 2.5 years to work closely with Mike, and to say that he is a Cadillac is to understate it. It has been a tremendous relationship. Mike, I thank you for that from a personal level, but on behalf of the board, I want to congratulate you. As the announcement said, that you are now the Inspector Grant is Provincial Operations Center Field Support Bureau, becomes commander of the Caledon Detachment effective immediately. Mike has had a very distinguished career already in many areas, and I've been fortunate enough to work with him on some of the highway safety initiatives that have been undertaken in Caledon. Mike was promoted to Staff Sergeant in Caledon. He's also served as acting commander. Huronia West Development has been the acting commander Caledon Detachment, working with this board since 2019. In addition, Mike is a critical incident commander in Central Region, and he's a recipient of the Police Exemplary Service Medal for 20 years. One of the comments that was made by Superintendent Jim Smythe, and I'd just like to read it, says, Michael leads from the front. He sets the pace and direction, is visible and engaging. He ensures that all his people are moving forward together, and that is an accurate statement. Commander Grant, welcome today, and congratulations on your appointment. It is well-deserved.
Mr. Bowden, thank you so much. I'm very pleased to continue in this role and especially become permanent in this role. So I look forward to the future and all the challenges that we have together moving forward. thank you so much for going through that and sharing that with the Police Service Board, sir. And thank you,
I'd like to
Chair.
echo the remarks. Congratulations. And we've had a very good working relationship, our board and yourself, on behalf of the detachment, Caledon, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. We'll now refer to our OPP Caledon agenda. Just a quick roll call. I think everyone's here. Are there any declarations of conflict? With that, I see none. We'll move to our first item, the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on Friday, May 28th, 2021. Can I have a mover? Mr. Bowden, a seconder. Mayor Crombie, all in favor? That has been carried. Thank you. The second item is the Caledon. In terms of the roll call, I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Medeiros is not here today, but we have quorum. The second item is the Caledon OPP second quarter report. Inspector Garrett, would you like to proceed with that?
Thank you, Chair. The Caledon OPP 2021 second quarter report. I'll go just page by page. So in the second quarter, we received 6, as far as public complaints, 6 policy complaints, 1 conduct complaint. The 6 policy complaints are all related to COVID enforcement regulations and how they've been changing against our policy. Page 2, as far as motor vehicle collisions and type, we're pretty much on par from where we were in 2020. There's been no significant increase or decrease. So we're moving forward with that. Criminal code and provincial statute charges laid. Our overall charges are up 13% during this quarter, 5% year to date. What we're experiencing is a drop in dangerous driving, impaired driving, and prohibited driving this year compared to last year, which is our criminal code traffic offenses. And our ride spot checks have increased, and our criminal charges in relation to impaired driving have actually decreased. Moving on to violent crime, our year to date, our second quarter numbers are there. They're very slightly 5% lower than they were in comparison to the second quarter of 2020. I would just like to make an amendment to the year-to-date totals. In the first quarter of this year, we did have 1 homicide and 1 attempt murder. That wasn't reflected on this report. It didn't pull up on the count, and I caught that after the fact, which affect the totals of the year-to-date totals, which is still approximately the same as our numbers last year. Moving on to property crime. The significant changes in quarter 2 is our increase in theft unders and theft overs. Our theft overs are related to motor vehicles thefts, and our theft unders are a large spike in theft of gas that from ironically the stolen cars that are coming through Caledon. So that's the spike we're experiencing in the second quarter. And I just noticed another typo in the year to date on break and enters. And although the second quarter, our break and enters are down 50%, our overall total is 29 for the year, 32 last year. So we're just lower, slightly lower than we were year to date last year. Drug crimes, they're slightly lower in this quarter. And they're very similar, and they're on par to be very similar to year-to-date in 2020. And our clearance rates, as you can see, they're slightly down for violent crimes and property crimes, and they're slightly up in drug crimes. Overall, our year-to-date first half of 2021 is 7% lower clearance rate than it was in 2020. That concludes our second quarter report here at the Caledon OPP detachment. If there are any questions from the board.
Thank you. Do any board members have questions? Mr. Bowden. I have to look around to find.
Commander Grant, I understand through my wife that the community of in Inglewood are thinking about putting people at the corner of Old Baseline and Highway 10 and doing a survey over a period of 2 or 3 days to see how many trucks or vehicles are running the red light there. We've already had one fatality there this year, as you know, and a number of them in that intersection over the years. So my question to you is, were you aware that they were going to do that, A? And B, is that useful at all for the community to be doing that type of thing? And then giving that information to you, can you weigh in on what you think the validity of that effort is?
Yes, Mr. Bowden, any input from the community, from the residents in the community that has to do with public safety, we are always welcoming that input. I also have that intersection identified as a hotspot. All of Highway 10 through Caledon is actually a hotspot, which triggers directed patrols from our traffic enforcement unit on a daily basis, every day, every evening, every day. But they're physically there, rotating on Highway 10 during our commuting times, and any information that is provided over and above our collision analytics and the observations being made by our officers is very welcomed, and I would happily receive those inputs from the residents and actually apply that to our directed patrols and how we deploy our members out there.
Okay, so what I'll do, commanders, I will maybe I'll get involved in it so that the report is put together in a format that's easy to pass to you, and I will work with them on it, and I will continue to communicate with you on that issue. Okay.
I thank you for that, for sure.
Right, and thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a mover to receive the report? Mr. Bowden, a seconder, Mr. Chadha, all in favor? The report's been carried. Thank you, Inspector Darren. Congratulations again. And this concludes section 10 of our agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
We will now begin the Peel Police Services Board meeting of September 24th, 2021. I'll do another roll call. Again, Mr. Councilor Medeiros won't be with us today. Everyone else is here. Are there any declarations of a conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll continue with the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Chief's update. Chief, please proceed with your update.
Good morning, Chair Atia. We only have a very few brief updates, one that Deputy Nick and I will commit to. I just wanted to advise the board that the service has concluded a search for a new Director of Government Relations and Public or Corporate Affairs. It is a newly created position for the organization, and we're pleased to have had a very vibrant set of candidates apply and have selected Mr. Charles Payette. Mr. Payette was previously a national senior manager for PwC, as well as in the public safety portfolio, as well as senior advisor to the Solicitor General of Ontario. At any rate, we welcome him to the organization and look forward to having him before the board in the near future. The second thing I just wanted to highlight is that this Sunday is the 44th Canadian Police and Peace Officers Memorial Service, which as a result of COVID is happening on a smaller scale, but is also concurrently virtual. We have typically a large amount of our officers that participate in the ceremony at Parliament Hill on the Sunday. This year, we are honoring it with a contingent that are riding and running to remember. They typically run 466 kilometers to Ottawa, and they will be running past our police divisions here within the region and finishing up at the end of the day at our headquarters at our memorial cenotaph. And I just want to acknowledge that this is a tribute to the lives lost in our sector across this country, but a proud day for us. Deputy Nick, can I hand it over to you just as you take a sip of your coffee?
Thank you, Chief. I'll hold on the coffee, and through the chair. To begin with, I'd like to provide some very brief updates about some investigations that regrettably we've been involved in over the course of the last 7 days. Unfortunately, our community has experienced some gun violence over the last 7 days. And that started on September 17th, where two groups had become involved in a disturbance in the area of Hall Street in the Airport Road in Mississauga. During the disturbance, there were gunshots, and unfortunately, one of the people involved in that dispute succumbed to their injuries and later died at a hospital. Since then, investigators have arrested Jazz Turan Sandhu, who was an 18-year-old man from Mississauga, and we continue to investigate that offense. On Wednesday, September 22nd, again, we responded to calls of gunshots. Upon police arrival, we located a woman and a man suffering from gunshot wounds. Fortunately, the wife will recover, or sorry, the woman will recover from her injuries. But again, we lost another life to gun violence. And we are continuing to investigate that offense. We believe the suspects involved in that fled the area in a gray Hyundai Tucson, and are asking anybody who may have been in that area with dash cam or information about it to please contact police. And finally, again on September 22nd, we responded to calls of shots fired at Midway Boulevard and Columbus Road in Mississauga. We located a 24-year-old man who was suffering from gunshot wounds. And really, despite the best efforts of the first responders, who really tried valiantly to do everything they could to render life-saving first aid, he unfortunately again succumbed to his injuries. And really what I wanted to do were three things in relation to these updates. First, an appeal to the community. If you have information, please contact us. You can contact us at our general number, or you can contact us anonymously through Crime Stoppers. Community safety is a shared responsibility, and we're really leaning heavily on our community to help us put an end to gun violence. The other thing that I wanted to do was also provide some perspective. Gun and gang violence will not be tolerated in our community. We have some incredible investigators, and those investigators will be relentless in their pursuit of making sure that people that engage in this type of activity in our community are held responsible for those actions. In addition to that, we will also work closely with our community, and we will work closely with our community to do everything we can to prevent gun and gang violence in our community. And we do have a gun violence reduction strategy, which we've worked incredibly hard with Deputy Andrews and his team, along with investigators on my side, in order to make a difference. And this is the perspective that I wanted to provide. We are seeing some positive results, which I attribute to that work, but also the interest of our community in helping their police service address that work. The number of victims from 2020, if you compare that to our current statistics, we are down 15% in the number of people who've been directly affected by gun violence. The number of incidents, 2020 versus 2021, is down 30%. And comparatively, if we look at 2019 to our current statistics, we're down almost 40% in number of incidents. So we are seeing some movement. We are going in the right direction, but our work isn't done, as we've seen over the course of this last week. So thank you, Chief. That was the update.
Thank you, Nick. And I think we have a question.
Through you, Chair, just a comment. Thank you, Deputy Milanovic, for the update. When a couple of weeks back, we're just coming to know that the numbers, when we compare between 2019, 2020 versus 2021, and it's low. And but in last week or so is deeply disturbing and challenging for the community. But we have full confidence in our police force and the investigator side. I just want to comment that as all of the community is concerned with the incidents happened in the last couple of weeks within Malton, the part of Mississauga, and in Brampton earlier this week is deeply disturbing. And I just want to make that comment, but thank you for your thank you for the giving the background information.
Thank you, Shada. Mayor?
Yeah, on a similar note, I just wanted to say that thank you for the background. Of course, I was asked about this as well and didn't want to speculate, but it seemed very isolated and very targeted. And I think that's the direction your investigation is going. I just wanted to reiterate that we continue to be one of the safest cities in Canada, safest regions in Canada, statistically speaking. And there are isolated incidents, unfortunately, and that's part of being a big city, and there are everywhere. But I have confidence in Peel Police, and our solvency rate is one of the highest, and you've already made an arrest, so that gives me great comfort. So I just wanted to reiterate to our residents that we are and continue to be a very safe city, and it's unfortunate there are incidents like this, but I know that you will apprehend the individuals and that this was not random in any way, and people should not feel unsafe. And if you wanted to comment any further about the specific nature, targeted nature of the shooting, that would be appreciated. I think it would give people a level of comfort.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through the chair. I can confirm the two incidents were targeted, were unrelated to one another. And, you know, as I think you very appropriately put, we are moving in the right direction. We are an incredibly safe community. The statistics that we do have support that, but unfortunately, we do experience incidents like we have over the course of the last week. And, you know, from our perspective, one is too many. And so we will do everything we can to work with the community and our team to prevent those.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Bowden?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think it would be useful when on the gun reduction initiative, and I know that when we had a press conference, Chief, back a couple of years ago, when on the 410 shootings, and there was a large display of guns on the table when that announcement was made. Every one of those guns that you seized had come through the United States. None of them had come or were sourced here in Canada through legal handgun owners. I think it would be useful, if we're going to reduce the guns on the street, is to be able to identify what the source of those guns were, if that is possible when you're dealing in guns and gangs or any incident with a gun, so we could clearly, as a board, and so the public could better understand how these guns or where these guns are from, and then we can work as a team to stop the incoming of these guns into Canada. So I think that would be something useful as we go forward.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Bowden, and I agree 100%, and I can assure you that that is one of our key activities, is to work with our other GTHA police chiefs. And as we've recently done with Chair Unica, Mayor Crombie, and Mayor Brown, meet with the city and municipal leaders to collectively look at multiple activities that we can do to strengthen this. And yes, you're correct about close to 80%, Nick, if I'm correct, of our seized illegal firearms in the last year were determined to have a U.S. origin. And that, as you know, is a complicated narrative, as we have land, border, sea, rail, vehicular, pedestrian mechanisms for firearms to enter our country. But we've had conversations with Minister Blair, Minister Jones at the provincial level on opportunities to strengthen our cross-border connectivity. But we also know that that's not the only solution. We have to work upstream to look at the individuals that are obtaining access to it, and that requires coordinated investigations across borders. As you can imagine, one of our 2 homicides this week was an individual from Toronto in our area that was likely engaged in criminal activity in the midst of the shooting. So the borders are one that require us to be collective on our efforts. So it is one thing that we look forward to reporting back to the board on as it relates to the advancements in this regard. Chair, with that, I can turn it back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move forward. The first item of our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, August 27, 2021. Can I have a mover to approve the minutes? Mr. Howell, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? It's been carried. Thank you. We'll move on to our deputations. Our first deputation today is a written submission from Mr. Chesley Alexander regarding the tripartite memorandum of understanding between Peel Regional Police, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and the Peel Police Services Board, and the establishment of an anti-racism advisory panel. The written deputation was included in the agenda today. Are there any comments regarding this deputation? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to receive the deputation. Can I have a mover? Mr. Chada, seconded by Chair Yanika. Thank you. All in favor? It's been carried. Our second deputation today is from Mr. Idris Urugo, who will be speaking to item number 3 of the public agenda on youth engagement, the youth engagement presentation. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Idris, and I invite you to unmute yourself.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me through you, Chair. I'm glad to be here. I would just start by saying that as a community member, that we respect the police. We recognize how difficult the work the police officers are doing, and we appreciate the scope and breadth of their job. But at the same time, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. There are issues, and I'll start with the first one. We went through the consultation, but what is shocking about this is, if we must have transparency and have trust, the report that just came out should have been brought forward to the community way in advance for community members to go through in preparation for today's delegation. But that was never done. These are some of the things that are impacting our relationship with the police. These are things the Peel Police can address, but they did not. And there's a huge question and concern from community members with that. So, of course, the police has had this report. It would have been nice for them to have brought out this report. They did not. That's a problem. The second point I'm going to address is it falls into the lack of apology to Kala Iliomade, my late brother. There was the incident that happened November 3rd of 2020, where comments were made. We would have expected the Peel Police to acknowledge that there was harm in that comment. It never came. We can see the pattern here, that the lack of or the inability of Peel Police to be forthright with community members when harm is caused has been problematic and perhaps responsible for the acrimonious relationship we continue to have with Peel Police. This is something that needs to be done. Then my third point on page 16 of the report, it did talk about the SRO and how some officers, which this was brought to our attention during the consultation, that the SRO program was, it may have been well intended, but it completely deviated into something else. It was more used as a training ground for police officers where they had to enhance their investigative skills. This is what community members have been talking about for a very long time. And during the height of the George Floyd protest, what was shocking was that Peel Police did not stop the SRO program. They did not pause and think about the impact, even while watching global outreach about police and community, especially the ACB community, African, Caribbean, Black communities, did not initiate this move. We had to do this. So the fact that we did this makes you wonder, how sincere is Peel Police in addressing the relationship that they have with our community? Everyone would have expected that initiative to be taken, but it was never done. So these are lists of issues that have not been addressed. Now, with regards to the consultation itself, it was never completed. Till today, community members are still waiting for Peel Police to return. I want to praise the Mrs. Powell and Wiley for the job that they did, but Peel Police was missing in action. Community members are still waiting for the conclusion of that for that consultation that never happened or was never completed. They wanted to hear the truth. Yes, we thank you guys for at least setting up that the engagement. However, when the conversation went to where it became uncomfortable for Peel Police to accept, they took off. And that was captured in the report itself.
Reese, if I can kindly ask, run out of time, if you can wrap up with final remarks.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
So with all of this, what I want Peel Police to do is that they should take a page from Chief Dan Kinsella, I believe I'm pronouncing his name right, the Chief of Police from Nova Scotia, I believe, Halifax, I'm sorry, when he openly acknowledged the hurt and harm done to community members and apologized. In order for us to continue to trust each other and build a relationship based on trust, Peel Police will have to come to the community and apologize for the harm done. In the absence of that, there's not going to be any meaningful community engagement. You have to atone for what you've done. You have to publicly acknowledge this and allow other community members from other groups to recognize that the Black community has just not been screaming, that we've been screaming based on facts as supported by this report. And that has been noted by everyone. So for us to make amends, for us to continue to trust one another and build a solid foundation with regards to community engagement, the PRP must come clean with our community, must acknowledge and let other communities know that we made errors and we can work to rebuild this damage. In the absence of that, community engagement cannot be anything but what we're seeing right now, and there's not going to be trust. And finally, with regards to the OHRC, it's covered in suspicion. We are not open to that because of how it came about and how that group was constituted, and not even atoning for what was done. There is no way our community can be open. So we want to work with you guys, and we hope that we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ragu. Your comments are well taken. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Okay, then I'd like to ask if someone can move the receipt of this deputation. Mr. Chattas, seconded by Chair Inika. All in favor? Thank you very much. It's been carried. Thank you, Mr. Urugu, for coming today and sharing your thoughts on these topics, and we will take them into consideration as we continue to try to do better for our community in Peel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to our third item, Peel Regional Police and Youth Engagement presentation. Chief, would you like to begin by introducing our speakers?
Thank you, Chair. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Mark, but I want to talk. I want to first thank personally Annette and Mwalia for their, the difficult work in this space. And just to hear from me before I hand it over to Mark is that meaningful work requires us to step into this space, and inaction is equally as problematic. So the reason these things take a long time is they are difficult pieces of work that I want to just reaffirm that need to be informed by the people who we serve and who have been aggrieved by different activities. And it doesn't happen alone. So I want to thank the two of you for being a key vehicle for us to start moving the yardstick forward. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of what you were about to say.
Thank you, Chief. You've left me a little bit to say there. Through the chair, in 2020, as part of the stand-up of a new executive team, structural reorganization and refocusing of PRP, the chief and the executive team consulted widely, internally and externally, through our community. Among the voices we heard was the concern in our community that was just voiced by the deputant regarding police and youth interactions, and particularly those interactions between police and Black youth in and around the SRO School Resource Officer Program. As a result of hearing and acknowledging these concerns, PRP began a consultative process in partnership with both school boards and community stakeholders. These community stakeholders were identified through the school boards and through the various chiefs advisory committees. And a committee was formed with an aim towards reimagining police and youth engagement. These consultations led directly to the pausing and eventual suspension of the SRO program. And I won't delve too deeply into that because I think Annette and Umwali will speak to that in their work, and led directly to our work with Pages for Good, which is captured in this report that's before the board today. Ms. Powers and Ms. Sauter will detail the findings of that consultative process. I'd like to thank them for their unflinching honesty and candor in amplifying the voices of Black youth and articulating the challenges and opportunities that exist for our community. With that, can I pass this over to you, Annette?
Thank you, Deputy. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Annette Power, and I am here accompanied by my partner, Wally Sauter. So first, we want to just definitely just say thank you. Thank you to the board and thank you to our community at large for the opportunity to share the voices and the findings of the community consultation process. However, I would not want to begin without recognizing that those who really contributed to this journey and those who unfortunately are only here in spirit. I would also like to share a statement that was included during the sessions as part of the land acknowledgement at the beginning of each consultation process. Today, we acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. We acknowledge the grave harm that colonialism brought to these lands, in particular, the erasure of African identities. Today, as settlers, we recognize, honor, and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Their labor, sacrifices, bravery, and contributions are integral to Canada's diverse and rich history. These were statements that allowed us as a group coming together to continue to challenge a very unique space and a very emotionally charged space that just to help provide the landscape for open and open dialogue. But with that, in our presentation today, we'd like to share our screen. So I'm just going to set that up. Just give me a moment. Let's see. And are you seeing my screen okay? I need a verbal. I can't see anybody at the moment.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Great, thank you. So we wanted to talk, I know we've heard and we've talked a little bit about the idea of reimagining youth engagement, and we deliberately decided to change the name of this presentation, or change the name of this report to a framework for change. What the outcome and the opportunities that are yet to be realized is something that still needs to be worked on and still needs to have voices and the ongoing representation of those who are in the community to develop and co-construct with the police. But as noted, we really would like to acknowledge the time and dedication of the youth that participated, the community organizations, grassroots groups, parents, activists throughout our community, teachers and school officials, and of course, members of Peel Regional Police. When we think about the SRO program, you know, this was a byproduct of policies that came from the Ontario Safe Schools Act. What really began as an institution initiative which meant well over time, as we continue to learn more about the program itself, something that really morphed into to circumstances that were out of not fully respective of the issues or the needs of all students. And you know, we know that these programs and initiatives may not always be perfect, given that humans are involved, but in many cases this became harmful and dangerous. These are systems that also reflect, you know, are a reflection of the hierarchy within our own societies. And we were dedicated to really wanting to address the equity and the intersectionality of some of those challenges. And with that, recognizing that there is some inherent bias within our society, as well as within policing, and as commented by Idris earlier, as one of the members of the group, you know, there is respect for the police. We understand the difficulties of that work, but these are concerns or biases as acknowledged by the group, where there is a tremendous amount of power imbalance. The goals of the consultation was really about to seek feedback about the SRO program, and particularly its impact on African Caribbean Black students, the parents of those students, and the communities. Our goal was to find opportunities to really center Black youth voices, particularly those who may have been harmed or are members or past members of any of the Peel school boards. And then to identify steps to move forward and build a framework for change. When you think of the scope of the work and the project, you know, it was our effort to really kind of create a space where all can teach, all can learn, and all can lead. And that led to over 75 online participants. All sessions were taking place in a virtual setting. And then also there throughout the process, which started as early as July, and I'll talk to that in a minute. But in October, our group as facilitators led over 20 group discussions. And then of course, throughout that process, we also provided surveys where we were able to get tangible feedback. And then of course, emails and correspondence, and naturally the outpouring of passionate, purposeful stories and experiences shared by all parties across the discussions and the sessions. As mentioned, The SRO program, the announcement was initially back on July 28th, by which Peel Regional Police announced the halt. And then August, the community consultation began. As noted earlier, that was a process that collectively from varying areas of stakeholders provided and recommended names. At the time in which the facilitators began, which was around early October, those main players within the consultation process had already been identified and were played a large part in setting the tone and the opportunity and the discussions that therefore happened. Leading throughout that, come November, mid-November, the public acknowledgement was made. Through February, we continue to have smaller group meetings, which would allow us to have more intimate discussion and understand different perspectives. And those also included presentations from time to time from various institutions and groups who felt there was a platform and opportunity to outline particular details. At that point, we concluded from our end as facilitators the necessary information for us to begin our report writing, and by which March we had come to a closer to final version, and then that was shared with the Peel Regional Police by April. How we set the stage, it was really about how do we help build and hold brave spaces for positive solution-focused dialogue. That wasn't always the case. There was definitely challenging moments throughout. We also wanted to establish guidelines and process with the group and create a forum for smaller group discussions. I think once we recognize the size of that group and its inabilities at times to really have clearly hear everyone's voices and perspectives and opinions, we opted for a different format. And then we looked at how do we outline the facts. We wanted to bring those institutions who were identified and part of the SRO program to share how we came to this place in which we were, and to give everyone an even and level footing on where do we need to build from. And that was what led us to determining what those goals of the framework would ultimately be and our pillars for that. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Wally Sauter.
Thank you, Annette, and greetings to Police Service Board and community at large. And so you'll be hearing an abridged version of the report that you have in front of you. And so in terms of the framework, these are the 5 pillars that were consistent throughout the conversations from community. We talked about transparency. Idris alluded to some of those processes. And so just really the community does want to be part of the sort of the decision-making processes. Now, of course, there might be some privacy procedures that the police is tied to. However, I think there's a way that the community and the police can potentially come to a compromise so that the community can always feel that they are part of the change that Peel Regional Police is trying to accomplish. Now, in terms of voices, particularly for youth, youth would like to be at the center of any decision about them. And so that was really great, and sort of a piece for us to think about in the future is that given the experiences of particularly Black male youth, we had a lot of challenges actually engaging them to inform this report. When it comes to acknowledging past harm, thinking about what are those reconciliation measures, again, really what does that look like? And this would be an opportunity to co-construct as well with the community so that you can come to a consensus on what that acknowledgement looks like and what does reconciliation look like. In terms of action, again, throughout the conversation with community and youth, they talked about very tangible accountability measures. And again, this is just an opportunity to continue this dialogue so that everyone feels a part of what that accountability looks like. With regards to equity, again, we recognize that particularly African Caribbean Black communities, as well as perhaps Indigenous, are some of the youth most harmed by the criminal justice system. And so really centering sort of the experiences as you think about processes, as you think about any kind of change, so that, again, the most disenfranchised youth are able to be part of the change that we would like to see. And so I'll summarize this slide, but essentially what youth talked about is really, again, back to accountability. How can they be part of really holding all of us accountable, particularly Peel Region Police, when there is misconduct? And this is, again, bringing them into those conversations so that they can all feel part of what that accountability would look like. The other piece that youth wanted us to pay attention to is that they recognize that in terms of public safety services, that they did not necessarily feel equitably represented, equitably protected from perhaps youth from other backgrounds. And again, if there's anything that you would like to take out of this slide, youth want to be completely part of the process from the construction of a procedure or a policy to its output. Next slide. And so similar to youth and community was very clear that if you're going to engage youth, you have to also engage the community itself, because the youth are part of an intergenerational experience of the interaction between communities and public safety services. And so nothing about us without us. If there's anything you're going to take from this slide, it is exactly that. And then the other piece is really thinking about what does meaningful community relationships look like? In the previous deputation, that was some of the comments that came through. And again, really moving away from engagement, which means that one touch point, once in a while conversation, to actually ongoing relationship, which is also why, part of the request from the community from this report is that we continue this conversation, that this is just the beginning. And then, of course, always recognizing the power imbalance. But again, that's information that is in the report that we'll be happy to continue to explain further. Next slide. So just wanted to highlight sort of the recommendations. There were 13 that were offered by the community, but we kind of, given the time constraints, we narrowed them down to 5. And so again, with your PRP's partnership with the OHRC, community really wanted to be part of those conversations where you can continue to unpack what are those legislation, policy, and programs that may have an unequal impact on the public services and safety for our community and for youth. The other piece around representational recruitment and ongoing anti-racism training, that was key, came up throughout the conversations, and really making sure that that recruitment and representation cuts across all levels of PRP and sort of decision-making processes. And then something that was very interesting that youth brought out is the fact that there is something called the adolescent brain development sort of behavior, and police need to be sort of trained a little more on that, because when teenagers are still, when teenagers' brains are still much more impulsive, etc. And so they wanted sort of the Peel Region Police to be a little more flexible and nimble with the way they respond to youth who perhaps have made bad decisions, recognizing that they're just still growing into themselves. And again, accountability. So really making sure that, what does that accountability look like, and co-constructing that. So making sure that, again, youth and community are part of that co-construction. I think that's, next slide on it. Thank you. If you have any questions. So again, went very fast given the time constraints. Just wanted to at least give you a sense of what are some of those conversations that came up at the meeting. And again, cannot stress enough that Black male youth were not necessarily involved, which is really part of an area of growth for all of us when we're thinking about engagement and relationships. Thank you.
Thank you
So
very
we'll take
much.
this opportunity now to, sorry, go ahead if there's any questions or comments.
Yes, I was going to pass it to the board, but in your last comment, Ms. Umwali, you said that Black youth males were not involved in this process?
Not to the degree that we would like. So if we are if the conversation is about who perhaps has had the worst outcomes with the SRO program, that representation was there. They did have representation through community, through parents, community groups, etc. However, the actual representation of male Black youth was not sufficient to our, I suppose, to us in terms of, again, making sure that nothing about us without us, and it is youth who are speaking for themselves, not other people speaking for them, despite how close the community might be to them. We still wanted to hear those voices.
But in the consulted,
I was just going to add, we did reach out and we did had recruitment efforts in hopes of reaching young Black youth, male in particular. Some did register, but on the day of the occasion when we had those conversations, they didn't participate. They weren't there at those times.
So we're looking at this as an opportunity for us to think a little more in terms of how can we engage this group in the future.
well, why do you think they never engaged?
I would like to leave it up to perhaps youth to speak to that. However, I would imagine, given the historical relationship that they may have had with the criminal justice system or the police services, that, you know, the trust that the previous community member had talked about is still a work in progress. And so we might have to be a little more creative in the ways that we approach them, in the ways that we reach out to them, and it will take time. So our project we did not have the luxury of time to actually invest in building those relationships in order to engage them. So that's, again, an opportunity for the future.
Okay. I'll hold any further questions from myself. I'll go to the board. Any questions from other board members? Okay. I just have, I just want one clarification. I have to admit, I'm kind of confused with the presentation a bit. What is the exact scope that you focus on in this exercise?
So the goal at hand when we were invited was to ask the community what they saw as the next steps post SRO. Through those conversations, topics and issues obviously expanded, and there was a lot of discussion around just the overall relationship with our with the African Caribbean Black community, police, and other institutions, the school board. So with varying levels of contribution and comments, we opted to kind of to frame it in terms of the pillars that allowed us to look at some of the larger issues, and with the expectation that they would be the need for deeper work in what that engagement outline would actually look like in the future.
Thank you. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Okay.
Chair.
Sorry, Deputy, one moment. I'm just going to give an opportunity to Chair Yanika to.
Thank you. And I apologize. When you asked for questions, I was taken aback because I was trying to process it, because it was very helpful to hear what Annette and Wally had to say. But my question in my head was, okay, so next steps, what would you like us to do? And the reason I was a little bit stupefied was we have marvelous people in the community like yourselves reaching out to the community. I'm sure the old white guy like me that represents the old colonial, everything that you've said, even though English is my second language too, I understand that natural barrier, but then we send people from the community and try to work with them within the community. It makes complete sense. You have to have them in the tent because it's not going to work otherwise. And then I'm hearing they won't engage. They won't engage with you as well. Okay, it's easy for me to say, well, then we've tried and we stopped. But you touched about, we need other avenues, other next steps. So we're not going to, what do you think they are? What else can we do? What else should we be doing? Because we need them to be at the table and engage. And boy, it's a tough one if people from within their community are reaching out to them and they still have an aversion. So I'm trying to understand that a little better in terms of, great, but what are the next steps? Because we need to do something.
Chair, could I interject here? Sorry, I hope I'm not cutting you off.
Not at all, please, anybody.
And I'll respond after you, Mark.
Actually, Wally, the question was directed to you. I'll let you respond first.
Oh, okay. So I think given the complexity of the issue, when we're thinking about sort of next steps, we have to recognize that then we'll have to have multiple players happening at the same time. And so one of the previous presenter talked about that lack of trust. Now, even though we are sort of members of that community, it will still take time because we come as representatives of an institution that has potentially caused harm. And so there is still other things that as the police service that need to happen to demonstrate that there is actually sort of a good intention, well-meaning intention to address those issues. So, you know, whether it's transparency, whether it's acknowledgement, except all those pieces are things that we have to, again, go continue the conversation with youth and whoever is going to come to us at this time to have those conversations, to co-construct then how can we continue to build that relationship? How can we, what does transparency mean? How do we, so it's really ongoing. There's no quick fix here. And the point is just continuing the conversation. Don't get discouraged. But most of all, as well, I think within the Peel Region Police services, it's to really think about how can you open the services, sort of that interaction, that open door policy a little more in a way where communities can see themselves represented in the decisions that are happening, in those next steps that are happening. So right now, I think the conversation is that we go into community, ask questions, and then go back into a little bubble and make the changes, and then off we go. And so what they want is that ongoing relationship. So we need to invest in ongoing relationship. And I believe the police force is really thinking hard about that in terms of ongoing youth engagement. Both community and youth said that even though there's still some pushback or resistance, people are still interested in continuing to engage until they get to a place where they are comfortable and can trust the intentions and that the services will be equally applied to this community, to the Black community.
If I could just sort of add to Mwali's statement there, Chair. So what we don't want is for this report to become a document that's printed and sits on a shelf, you know, say we pat ourselves on the back and say, what great work we've done. The changes that need to be made, the work that needs to be done is not a overnight effort. It needs to be ongoing work. And we're working at all three levels, at the policy level, at the training level, and at the operational level. At the policy level, you can look at the work that we're doing with the OHRC and the build out of that piece that will address some of the formal concerns about transparency and accountability. At the training level, there's tremendous work to be done, but some of the steps that we've taken include the engagement of academics such as Dr. Sonia Singh and Dr. Kwesi Owusu-Benfu to develop training with our training bureau that's focused on our relationship, in particular with youth and Black youth. We're also working with facilitators from 6 children on the UMAB, the Understanding and Managing Aggressive Behavior in Children. Again, incremental work that will help us be better as police officers. We plan on rolling out a lived experience training, rolling out in the new year, lived experience training that centers the voices and experiences of Black youth for our officers. Now that's at the training level. At the operational level, you've heard me talk before about our DMU officers, Divisional Mobilization Officers, who are engaged in non-traditional approaches to policing and relationship building with our community. That's the piece that Mwali addressed, is on a day-by-day basis, how we build relationships with our community, in particular, young people in our community, has to be rethought. And the work of the DMU is a step in that process. And we continue that engagement that is real, that can be, occurs over time and is not centered around a particular incident or driven by a particular agenda, but a real engagement with our community. So it's ongoing work, but we've taken the 5 pillars identified by this report and have centered them at the basis of the policy, training, and operational work that we're doing going forward.
If I could, that's very helpful, and I particularly appreciate Umwali's answer. Umwali, I'm really big on tangible outputs. To give you a different example, when we're discussing strategic plans, because everybody discusses strategic plans, and the first words that come out are, "We believe in operational excellence," and I'm the guy that says, "Well, what the hell does that mean?" Sounds great. We believe in operational. Where the rubber hits the road, what does that really mean? And so to give you an example on the other side, so we talk about we want to change people's lives. What our government has done, the regional government, with the help of the mayors and my county, we've invested $1 billion in housing. We put in $1/3 billion before any other government did. Then the federal government showed up, and I'm waiting for the premier's check. You may be interested in knowing this as a shout out to everybody on the screen. You should be so proud. I was at a Marco meeting virtually, mayors and regional chairs. We were talking about the community safety and well-being plan. And I was saying, we're so proud. And everybody stopped and they're saying, what are you talking about, Nan? I go, our community said, well, you know, that's deferred until next year. None of us have done that. I go, well, we finished ours early this year and we're trying to implement it. And now we've got to understand the implementation. The Black North Initiative folks came. What a marvelous initiative. The Region of Peel government was the first government to sign on. And we're going to be announcing pretty soon, we may be putting into their kitty as much as $2.5 million for 50,000 chunks of equity, so that from people from the BIPOC community can now have a down payment to buy homes. That's tangible. I think people, and that's what I always reach for and say, I understand the challenges, I understand the problems, but I think on behalf of all of us, it's easy to say we try and throw up our hands, and Mark's right. I've been around 33 years. There's a lot of reports on the back that are collecting dust that never see the light of day. We don't want that to happen here. So at first I was somewhat concerned, but Amali, I really appreciate your answer that we're not there yet, but we're going to get there. We have to keep working through this, and everybody understands that. I want you to know we are all very genuine in that, because another one of I hate wasting people's time, especially my own, and we're not going to waste people's time on this file. It's too big. So we have our community safety and well-being. You touched upon, I missed the OHRC initiative that we've come up. I think we're making a genuine effort, but I'll conclude with this. Without the engagement of the youth, of the people who actually wear the shoes, the guy making the shoes shouldn't say they're perfect. It's the people wearing them that'll tell us. We got to get them in some shoes and tell us how they feel about how we've done, to use that old analogy. So this is very much a work in progress from my perspective, but we still need the community's help. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, because we can't fail this time around. So with thanks for all your efforts, but much more to be done.
Crombie.
Thank you. So just to follow up on Nando, Cherinika, I don't know that I understand what the path forward is and what the recommendations are, or what, as Nando was describing, the concrete actions and steps that we'll be taking that need to be done. I don't know that that's clear for me. And I think we have a serious void in that we haven't really engaged the very people we need to. So I don't know if I've expressed that clearly enough, but I think there may be some more work that needs to be done.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to also echo similar comments. And it's not intended just to repeat what's said, but I think it's because it's a topic that I very much care about, and I know our board very much cares about. I also feel that when I listened to the report, and trying to understand it as we went along, I don't know how these recommendations then begin to get translated into meaningful changes. It's hard for me to connect the dots a bit. I think the word tangible, Nando used that. I think I agree. There's something missing there. And I wonder whether maybe you have more details. Like, this is, you said it's a high level report, but maybe in the details there are specifics, but it would be useful for our board to understand more of the specifics. We have a lot of moving parts in the police service right now around some bold projects that the chief and his team are leading. And it's very important that as we do these exercises in parallel, that they interconnect into everything else that we're doing. So it, translates into meaningful change and systemic change in the police service. So I think that's a missing gap for me as a board member. And I wonder whether there could be a follow-up or, some details that come to us as a board so we understand where we're going with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, just on behalf of Mark and I, our organization is full of various streams of, I think we now see it as not an entitlement, but as programming that has to serve certain elements of the community. And whether it be seniors, mental health, addictions, newcomers, and all of our priority populations, we are responsible for, nurturing what that programming looks like. And I think, what we're talking about is a stream of programming that has been woven into policing, just as Annette has indicated, right across, this province and beyond, that went unnurtured for years. And, and then within it has had an impact on a certain community and multiple communities. Specifically, we're hearing, we wanted to focus on the voices of our Black community and how it's affected Black youth. It all requires us to, make purposeful changes and rebuild what youth engagement looks like. And it may look completely different than it ever did, but we wanted to do it in a way that, brought in the voices of those that are impacted. And so, what you've seen is recommendations which my team is going to take away to help build in and inform. And it's going to be a formative process. It's not clear. It's obviously identifying gaps which we need to build into how we build youth engagement, whether it be within the four walls of a school or separately. We've chosen to retract that programming. We didn't need school board trustees to definitively tell us that. It was very obvious to us. So I think to add clarity, the heavy work is on our side of the fence, which we would commit to coming back to the board and providing clarity as it continues to evolve. And I think the effort today was to make sure that the board, because you were very heavily invested in, when the discussions we're having at PDSB and, post George Floyd, listen, I think, we've heard voices, say that this is responsive. It is responsive to the voices that have been egreged and affected, but we too have taken a role, pre-George Floyd to say, what's happening here? Why is it, why do we have OHRC cases that are, landing at our doorstep that relate to, young people that are being affected? My comments earlier about inaction is just as bad as, and sometimes we get criticized for our actions, but we will continue to listen and formatively make those changes. I think, bringing in Annette and Wally as facilitators, and we didn't get a chance to even go through their CVs that are international, and they stepped into a difficult space because they're not ambassadors for us as policing. They are subject matter experts that are helping bridge the deltas. And so we're very thankful for them. We wanted to use this as an opportunity to show you that behind the scenes, there has been meaningful activity. It takes a long time, and it is part of the journey. We will commit to coming back to you, Mayor, Chair Unica, and those that are very heavily invested in where this ends up. Listen, you've heard testament. I would never have chosen policing as a profession, as a Sri Lankan immigrant, if I didn't encounter an officer. That doesn't mean that, the programming needs to stay the same as it did, 20, 30 years ago. We do feel that there is a space for us that's appropriate and a space for other human services to take on. And so we look forward to showing you what that looks like here in Peel. So thank you for that.
Chief,
thank you for the clarification. Go ahead.
Just one last comment, and I appreciate Mayor Crombie for her comments. She had a marvelous series where she reached out to the community, and I was listening in on the Thursday nights that she did. And when she, to her credit, engaged in the Black, by the way, this is 6 years ago after she started the first diversity and inclusion committee that I've ever heard of, and I had a privilege of sitting on as well. There we were listening in, and I'm going to speak for myself and not Bon, boy, you felt the concerns and the hurt, and the state of affairs isn't right. And we were just, okay, so what can we do next? But the point I wanted to make, Annette and Amali, and I hope I get this right, I think it's Dr. Cornel West, that brilliant educator, philosopher from the US, one of the lines that he came up with, and this is why we want to engage, he said, we finally got everybody's attention. Let's make sure we make this a big ask. So I guess Bonnie and I are saying we're reaching out. We need to understand the ask. I think we know, I don't want to speak, we know well enough, we can't determine that for you. So we are reaching out. We're trying to cope with next steps. You've got our attention. We want to be engaged. We cannot lose this opportunity. So that's right. Last thing I would tell you is, and I'm going to take this from Juliet Jackson, I love the framework that we put around courageous conversations. Mayor's gone by, Bonnie's and Nando's wouldn't be asking this question. We just say, I don't know if we want to, but we're reaching out and asking, even if we're admitting we're not sure at what place and point we are, we need more help. And I think that's the obligation we have. We really need your help. And as the chief, to go forward, keep engaging these youth and saying, you need to talk to us. What forum do you want us to be sitting in? Because we cannot lose this opportunity. So I hope we come across as genuine, even if I'm stumbling and not using the right words. We cannot lose this opportunity, but we have a genuine willingness to want to make this situation better. Final point, because this is what your equality and equity side. People are starting to understand that. People are starting to understand intersectionality. We're finally captivating people and getting their attention. We got to keep moving to the goal line and say, here are the tangible outputs that we need from this as well. So I'm going to leave it at that and hope that that made some sense. Again, thanking you and the chief and Mark for your comments, but much, much more to do. And we're here to work with you to do it.
Ms. Power, I see you'd like to comment.
Thank you very much. So I appreciate the comments and the questions and the desire for detail or having those tangible pieces with which to move forward. I think I would like to just kind of re-look at the framework or the pillars in which we've outlined and described, and even connect back to some of the comments that were made by Idris as part of his deputation. And in order for us to have those next steps, there are some key areas that really need to be addressed. And namely, we talked about acknowledging the harm, to which those things have not happened. Having the opportunity to make concrete changes, the building that trust authentically. Those are some key pieces to speak to, again, to reiterate some of the points that Amwali also commented on again, was that those things need to happen before we are in a position to invite youth with lack of hesitation, with trust and the type of motivation that we would love to have from them to be a part of this process. They need to see some of those things happen first as a community, as outlined throughout that process. Those are also key pieces that need to happen first before we start to develop what does the next step or what does the strategy look like. I hope that helps, that this prepares us or provides a primer for those next steps that happen within Peel Regional Police before we continue to make those defined points of tangible action.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I know for myself, speaking for myself, I think so focused on change, so focused on doing better with the chief and the leadership team, often maybe I don't fully appreciate or understand the process of reconciliation that's required to make sure that more young Black youth engage with us. And maybe that's something I need to understand better. And, I will, do my best to kind of appreciate that more and understand how that needs to be done so that everybody comes along with us as we continue to bring positive change. So with that, any further comments from the board? Okay, can I have a mover to receive this presentation? Chair Unica, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Perfect, it's been carried. Thank you very much. And again, we're very grateful for the effort you put into this initiative, this exercise, and the presentation today. Despite our comments, you should know that this is very important to us and we are very thankful. Okay. We'll move on to the next part of our agenda, our new business. Item number 4 engine replacement and refurbishment of Marine One. Chief, would you like to speak to this report?
Sure, I'll have Acting Deputy Shearer just comment on this, please.
Thank you, Chief and Chair. As the board knows, the PRP Marine Unit has an impressive presence in Peel waterways and frequently collaborates with neighboring jurisdictions in the Coast Guard for many initiatives and rescue efforts, sometimes in the most adverse of weather and water conditions. Marine One is our largest vessel and was purchased by Hike Marine in Leamington in 2007 after a competitive bid process. Given that the vessel is coming up on 15 years of use, it is in significant need of updating and repair to the hull, the helm, nautical equipment, and electronics. The 2021 budget includes planned funding to cover the refurbishing costs estimated at approximately $449K. It should be noted that the replacement cost for this vessel is in the area of $800K. What we are seeking is board approval for a sole source procurement from Hike Marine for their service, and also that approval be granted to the procurement director to increase the contract if actual costs exceed the estimate based on the available budget. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from board members? Chair Nika.
Yeah, and maybe Rob can help me. It was during my term as regional chair, so I'm going to say before COVID, 2.5 years ago, we had that ceremony on the waterfront where a new vessel was just being anointed, or whatever the term is. Rudy Cuzzetto was there. And what I do remember from it, Rob, is it was explained to us at the time how amazing this technology, the new boat, is relative to how much shoreline we have to patrol and how archaic this old system or equipment that we have is. So I hope I've got this right. We're starting to acquire some of the newer stuff, which I think was one of those new boats that I was at the ceremony for. And I remember the conversation about how far behind we are. This is just trying to work to fix that. And as I said, what I remember the most was how much shoreline we cover and all that goes on down there, and only more to come. So am I right, Rob? We're buying some new equipment, but we're refurbishing and having to do more on that front. This is all part of that.
Yes, Chair Unika, you're correct. That was actually the launch of Marine 2, which is our second boat. It's the smaller of the two, but more nimble and significantly faster. Marine 1 is the larger of the boat and is more used to manage a lot of the deep tumultuous water that we can experience on Lake Ontario.
Rob, and as I say, what I remember isn't just the technology, the boats, but the scope of our obligations down on the water. So, and it was more than I'd ever thought it was. So certainly, if you need a mover, I'm happy to move the report, and yes, certainly carry on.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Mr. Bowden, all in favor? Thank you. It's been carried. We'll now move to. Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for the presentation. We'll move on to the body-worn camera status report. Deputy Chief Eduardi, would you like to provide us the update?
Good morning, and through the chair, thank you. I will provide the update. So as indicated in the report, the initiative is going quite well, in fact, and is on track in all of the major areas of scheduling, scope, budget, and resources. We are on time and on budget with this project. In fact, we are ahead in some of the areas. We have reached almost 2/3 deployment of the body-worn camera throughout our frontline membership, and we continue to roll out at a pace that we can thoroughly understand and provide metrics for to the community as we continue through the project. Of note, and difference from our previous update to the board, is the fact that we do have our policy online, and it's available to the public to view, read, and comment on. We have also begun to track our outreach in terms of the education component that started quite some time ago with the project. We have compared with other regions in Ontario and across Canada, and we're happy to say that we have had the largest engagement outreach for the body-worn camera. We have reached over on our social media platform close to 300,000 accounts, We have had over 75 points of contact through local community engagement, and we continue to shape our policy and procedure on body-worn camera with this input. That would be the update for body-worn camera this month.
Any questions from the board? Deputy Chief, you mentioned that the policy is online and the public can read and comment on it. Is there a particular mechanism for the public to comment on our policy?
Yes, sir. Through the chair, we do have a public-facing site in which there's opportunity to comment.
Perfect. Okay, can I have a mover to receive this report? Mr. Chada, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? It has been carried. Thank you. And so that concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board meeting. Again, thank you everyone for joining. And yes, Mr. Chada. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're waving. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant weekend. Take care.